You want to keep it going for another 5 years? Pocahontas says yes.
And she's sitting there smiling and clapping like, yes, yes, I do. I want to keep the war going.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken.
Okay, we always do this where I'll start telling you something and we're like, why don't we just start recording? So last night, 9 o'clock, I have my alarm set for Trump's speech. And I'm laying in bed with the kids because they're falling asleep. I put my headphones in. I'm like, okay, this is perfect. They're going to sleep. I can pay attention. Not even 5 minutes into the speech, my daughter looks over at me and she just throws up in the bed. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. So I have my headphones in. So technically I'm still listening, but there's chaos ensuing. So I pick her up. I get her to the bathroom. So while she's in the bathroom, I'm trying to clean up this mess. Okay. My son's still like sleeping through the whole thing. I don't know how. And then she comes walking out and she's like, Mom. And she steps off the tile from the bathroom and leans over so that she perfectly throws up right onto the carpet. And I was like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
I am laughing so hard because that's what my dog does. She will vomit on the bed, the bed. She's done it like a few times in the last year. And then if she's on the tile or on the hardwood, she will go over directly to the carpet. And I'm trying to drag her away like, no, 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 not there, not there.
Yeah, mine does that too. And we like the whole downstairs is tile other than that like one rug. And she has to go on the rug. And it's like maybe she thinks it's more like grass. I don't know. But why do they do that? Why?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So anyhow, that was wild. And then this speech was the longest presidential address in history. So now I don't feel so bad because I fell asleep like 2 hours in because I normally go to bed by like 10. So I was like, Tara, you're just going to have to pick up whatever I lost because I really tried hanging in there, but I was exhausted. It was a wild day. But before the throw up happened, I loved the way he opened it up by saying, my fellow citizens, America is back. And the crowd starts chanting USA. And it just, it was like one of those moments where you get chills and you're like, thank God. And I thought the 2 hours that I heard, I thought he did a great job. I mean, what did you think? I thought he was very much in check.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch it live because of the time difference, but I watched this morning and you're right, it was incredibly long. And like you said, it broke the record for the longest address to a joint session of Congress. But I'm kind of biased because I love to hear Trump talk. So for me, I thought it was great.
Yeah, I mean, I like listening to him talk too, but it's like truly, when he does go off on tangents or just start talking about himself, I'm like, okay, come on, like let's move on. But I didn't really see him do that at all. I thought he did a very good job of highlighting all of the things that he's achieved already in less than 2 months. And we already knew this, but just hearing it all at once, it's like he has done so much more in a couple of months than Biden did in all 4 years. And the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, this sounds more like a speech of an outgoing president that's highlighting how great their term was than someone who just got in on January 20th. I mean, it really, there's so much there. But of course, right when he started, the Democrats began like literally acting like animals. I mean, they're yelling and they're making all these noises, and it was so disruptive. So Mike Johnson had to call the sergeant in arms, and they ended up escorting a Democrat out for just screaming at Trump and ignoring multiple warnings. It was just embarrassing for them.
It really was. And that was Rep. Al Green. And he kept interrupting Trump. And then after he was escorted out of Congress, reporters asked him what he was shouting to the president. And I want to play the clip of what he said.
Shouting to the president?
The president said he had a mandate.
And I was making it clear to the president that he has no mandate to cut Medicaid. I have people who are very fearful. These are poor people, and they have only Medicaid in their lives when it comes to their health care. And I want him to know that his budget calls for deep cuts in Medicaid. He needs to save Medicaid, protect it. We need to raise the cap on Social Security. There's a possibility that it's going to be hurt. And we got to protect Medicare. These are the safety net programs that people in my congressional district depend on. And this president seems to care less about them and more about the number of people that he can remove from the various programs that have been so helpful for so many people.
Yeah, I'm not going to play the whole clip. But again, this is the typical liberal false narrative. Just like the narrative about Trump wanting to ban abortion, Trump is not trying to get rid of Medicaid and Medicare. He's trying to get rid of fraud in the Medicaid and Medicare systems.
I know. I feel like it would have been awesome if Trump's like, so how's that ban on abortion going? You know, because they all said like, oh, he's gonna ban it. He's actually making it like better. He's paying for IVF, like for people that can't get pregnant. I mean, it's ridiculous at this point, but that guy's so freaking old. In his mind, he probably thinks that they are cutting Medicaid.
Yeah, he had to get his little walker out to be escorted out of the room. But you brought this up yesterday and you said like before the speech, Democrats were encouraging people to boycott, right? And saying it's just going to be another, MAGA rally. But what actually it was the typical clown show in Congress where they were showing their true colors. And it was just like when Trump was sworn in and Hillary and the, leftist elites were sitting there rolling their eyes and smirking and, like showing absolutely no respect. And it's not a good look, right? And I want to play this clip from Fox News chief political analyst Brit Hume and how he thought the Democrats reacted. If there's volume. No.
Which we'll get to in just a moment. But Britt, let's get your thoughts. This was the longest speech. She is now the record holder for the longest speech to joint session of Congress, beating Bill Clinton.
Thank you so much. Welcome you back in Pennsylvania. This was the most boisterous, the longest, the most partisan speech I've ever heard a president give in this kind of setting, and I go back about maybe 50 years on this. I also think it may have been the most effective. I mean, if you ever doubted that Donald Trump is the colossus, the political colossus of our time and our nation, this night and this speech should have put that to rest. The Democrats seem to be falling into trap after trap after trap as he recognized these people and celebrated the people he pointed to in the gallery and their stories, while the Democrats sat glumly on their hands through all of that. It was a terrible look. Al Green's attempt to disrupt the speech was a bad look for the Democrats. This was I think, politically speaking, this was pretty powerful stuff, as powerful as I think I've heard.
I agree. 100%. It's making the Democrats just look worse and worse. And I keep saying, like, at this point, I don't get mad. I just laugh. I'm like, keep going, because you're just losing more and more people. But it's like the majority of the country voted for President Trump. And yes, he's always speaking about making America great again. And that's why 77 million Americans voted for him. It's just crazy that they're still on this narrative that this is a bad thing. And with them just all day long, I'm hearing clips of them encouraging their base or what's left to not watch the speech. And when Biden was in office, we watched it. We took notes. We reported on it. Whether you like the president or not, you should be informed on what's taking place in your country. And so why are they so adamant about their base not watching it? Because they're afraid that he's going to be likable. People are going to be like, that actually sounds really good. But I swear they would censor the speech if they could get away with it,
Oh, yeah.
But I loved how he did call the Democrats out for like not standing or clapping or cheering for the incredible wins for America, the country we're all sharing. And he invited them, and making America great again. And of course, they just sit there and look all pissed off.
With
But
holding up their little signs.
their little signs, yeah. Or like on their phone, like teenagers, there were so many of them just looking down on their phone. So disrespectful and unprofessional. But I have to play this clip that I came across this morning on TikTok from the Proverbs 31 woman. We are going to follow her now. Everyone should follow her. She's freaking hilarious and just so on point. So listen to what she thought of the speech. Oh, no, no, no. Please play. Oh, please play. Okay, let me try this one more time. I'm going to be so sad if this doesn't play.
Oh my God, y'all, this is too much. I am watching this address to the Joint Congress. Let me tell you guys something. The Democrats, if you are a Democrat, you should be so embarrassed. They're acting like little bitty kids. They all got an attitude. They had to kick Al Green out because he running there shaking the stick. Nancy Pelosi slobbering on herself. Hakeem Jeffries sitting over there. And did you see Jasmine Crockett when Al Green got kicked out? She sit down like, I don't think I should do it no more. You should not. They all over there holding up signs, some all false and Elon and all of this. They are so embarrassing. I wouldn't want to be a Democrat, but you know what this does? It lets me know that I'm on the right side because everything that man is saying is good for America. And now you see who does not want America to prosper. You see who does not care about America. Them Democrats sitting over there with an attitude. I'm sick of them. Oh my God, they're embarrassing. I couldn't be called a Democrat. No way. They look like old, brittle, demonic demons. They look like gremlins, just bitter bigots. They just look like their life sucks. Their life sucks. They look unhappy. I wouldn't want to be married to none of them, honestly. They look like they are just terrible in a relationship. Like they frown up at everything. You can't be yourself, can't have no fun. They're bullies. They suck. I am so glad Trump is back in office. Because look at the leadership. This is rate the leadership. I'm going to give them a thumbs down. Can we fire all of them? They don't even want to collaborate with the president. You know, that's supposed to be in leadership, collaboration. They don't even want to do that. They don't even care that things are going good. Did you hear the stuff that he was listing that they found? With the waste? And I'm glad he called Stacey Abrams out too. But I'm sick of black Democrats. You know what? Y'all taking the fall. You got them white Democrats and put y'all up in the front for y'all to take the fall. Now y'all looking stupid and ignorant. I'm glad they put Al Green's old funky behind out. Oh my God.
Glad they pulled his old funky behind out.
I mean, she's not wrong. They are all miserable and their lives kind of suck under this administration.
Yeah, I thought she said it so well. Like they looked terrible, just like a bunch of children. I mean, it really is embarrassing. But I mean, my God, we can't go over everything he talked about, but I feel like so much of what he talked about, we've already talked about on the podcast. You know, he mentioned restoring free speech, closing the border, ending the tyranny of DEI. And he said, our country will be woke no longer. I was like, that was perfect. And then the way he was talking to the guests there was, you would never see Biden. I don't think I've ever seen another politician just really connect with people in the same way. So when he was discussing men no longer being allowed in women's sports, he introduced a girl, Peyton, who sustained a traumatic brain injury at the hand of a man pretending to be a woman in sports, and how it, you know, ruined her ability to continue in sports. And he made the point that it was demeaning to women and will no longer be allowed. And there are all the Democrats just like sitting down, not cheering it on.
Did you see the list of how many of them voted to keep men in transgender, I mean, to keep transgender men in women's sports the other day?
No. But
Yeah,
it probably was all of them because they're just like with the illegal migrants that are assaulting women, how they voted that they shouldn't be deported.
It was 45 of them. Basically, all the Democrats voted for it, and someone put out a list with all their names.
Good.
Yeah.
Good, because it's absolutely ridiculous. I thought it was funny because when he was talking about tariffs, he mentioned Biden leaving them with such a mess that egg prices are through the roof, just because like the left is constantly, that's like their only talking point, the price of eggs, and it's all because of Trump, not because we started killing millions of chickens because we think they have the bird flu, right? So I thought it was funny he threw that in there. And then, of course, he gave Elon Musk a nod for everything he's doing with Doge. Um, he sounded kind of like you, Tara, because he started listing out some of the more ridiculous spending. And it was pretty funny. Like people were kind of laughing, and he's like, but it's true. It's true. So that was like, it was comical, but also like, oh my God, if anyone didn't know what was going on, they sure do now. So yeah, it sounded kind of like a recap of our episodes and like all the ridiculous spending. And then he introduced Lake and Riley's mother and sister. And I didn't realize he said the first bill he signed into law was the Lake and Riley Act, which requires DHS to detain illegal aliens who had been arrested for burglary, larceny, theft, or shoplifting. And then he said her name correctly, Laken Hope Riley, which was a big deal because we can remember Biden calling her Lincoln during the debate. And, everyone stood up to cheer for this woman and like show support for her, except the Democrats. They wouldn't even stand up for this woman. I mean, how awful. And then he also introduced the mother of 12-year-old Jocelyn, who was brutally killed by Venezuelan gang members. It was that Tren de Aragua gang that we've talked about before. And he said how this gang is now labeled a terrorist organization. He brought up Greenland and the Panama Canal. And then he got a big standing ovation for saying that they found the monster, or one of them, that was like the mastermind behind the Abbey Gate bombing during the withdrawal in Afghanistan. And he said he's on a plane headed to the United States to face the swift sword of justice. So
Yes.
good news.
Yeah, again, it was an outstanding speech, and he also addressed the war in Ukraine. But I want to take this back a couple of days to late Monday because the Trump admin, the White House, had announced that they were going to pause any further military aid to Ukraine. And I looked on Truth Social and I didn't see Trump post anything about it. So I'm like, is this legit or not? But I saw it in a ton of news sources. And a White House official was quoted as saying, the president has been clear that he is focused on peace. We need our partners to be committed to that goal as well. We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it's contributing to a solution. And so this announcement came out after Zelensky told reporters that the end of the war was still, quote, very, very far away. So Trump did respond to that, and he posted on Truth Social, and he said, this is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky, and America will not put up with it for much longer. So then yesterday, Zelensky backtracked, and he posted on X about how he does want the war to end, and now he's willing to work with America. And Trump brought this up in the speech. But before I get to that, I have to play a clip of one of my favorite things that he said during this speech. And hold on, here we go. Oh no. Hang on one second.
They're working tirelessly to end the savage conflict in Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians and Russians have been needlessly killed or wounded in this horrific and brutal conflict with no end in sight. The United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense with no security, with no anything.
I'm going to assume that's the Democrats clapping.
Yeah, we can't hear it, the clapping part.
Going on. Here it comes.
You want to keep it going for another 5 years? Yeah. You would say Pocahontas says yes.
He said Pocahontas says yes. And let me apologize first for the beginning of that clip because randomly my clips will decide to post these like 5-second check ads before the clip because I'm tied into like the check internet. So it didn't do that earlier, but it did now. So sorry about that. As you guys know, we don't edit anything, so you'll hear this in the podcast. But he asks, like, do you want to keep it going for 5 years? Pocahontas says yes, and the room erupts in laughter. And then in one of the clips, the camera pans to Senator Elizabeth Warren, who he's obviously talking about. And she's sitting there smiling and clapping, like, yes, yes, I do. I want to keep the war going.
I was dumbfounded. I mean, I was laughing when it showed her and she's sitting there clapping because I'm like, do they realize how bad this makes them look? Like they are now the party of war. And but they don't get it. I mean, she thought it was great. And little does she know the rest of America is like, what the hell?
Yeah, absolutely insane. And so then Trump talks about how Zelensky sent him a letter, which I think he was referring to the X post that Zelensky made because it sounds exactly the same. And I won't play the clip because there is a lot of clapping in the background when he's talking. So I'm going to read what Zelensky posted on X yesterday. And he said, I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace. None of us wants an endless war. Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. My team and I stand ready to work under Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts. We are ready to work fast to end the war, and the first stages could be the release of prisoners and truce in the sky, ban on missiles, long-range drones, bombs on energy and other civilian infrastructure, and truce in the sea immediately if Russia will do the same. Then we want to move very fast through all next stages and to work with the U.S. to agree to a strong final deal. We really do value how much America has done to help Ukraine maintain its sovereignty and independence. And we remember the moment when things changed, when President Trump provided Ukraine with javelins. We are grateful for this. Our meeting in Washington at the White House on Friday did not go the way it was supposed to be. It is regrettable that it happened this way. It is time to make things right. We would like future cooperation and communication to be constructive. Regarding the agreement on minerals and security, Ukraine is ready to sign it in any time and in any convenient format. We see this agreement as a step towards greater security and solid security guarantees, and I truly hope it will work effectively. So this guy like makes my head spin with the back and forth shit. And I hope that what he wrote is legitimate and that he's going to humble himself enough to come to the table and strike a deal, preferably in a costume, aka a suit. But like that sounded really nice, right? It sounded like, yes, we are ready to make peace and, you know, we're going to come to the table and make this happen.
But that's what he said before the Oval Office.
I know.
Meeting.
I know. And then yesterday, reportedly, he addressed the people of Ukraine and he said that he's instructed their Ministry of Defense and the heads of Ukrainian intelligence and diplomats to contact their counterparts in the United States and get official information about Trump pausing this aid to Ukraine. And he said Ukraine and America need to have a respectful dialogue and a clear position from one another, which frankly, I think Trump has made our position very clear. And by the way, I hate using that phrase now, very clear, or hearing that phrase, because all it does is remind me of the fucking Biden admin and KJP. But Zelensky also talked about how Ukrainian resilience is strong and they have the means to protect themselves. And he said, but maintaining normal partnership-based relations with America is essential to bringing the war to an end, and nobody wants an endless war. Great, but you know who does want an endless war? It seems like fucking Europe does, because right after it was announced that we're going to be, you know, pausing this funding to Ukraine, the EU announced a plan to pay for the war, and it looks like they're going to be, you know, digging into their own pockets, or more likely the pockets of the taxpayers, because realistically, the only way they can afford to throw money at Ukraine is by increasing taxes and cutting funding from other areas in their own countries. And so on Tuesday, the head of the EU proposed an $840 billion plan to build up Europe's budget or defense budget, and it's called Rearm Europe. So where's the money coming from, right? Considering that most countries in Europe are currently like financially fucked. Well, they want to take a page out of the Biden handbook and jack up everyone's budget deficit. And there's this thing called the National Escape Clause, that's part of the EU Stability and Growth Pact. And it allows member states to run larger budget deficits than they typically allow if they need to increase defense spending. And realistically, I understand why this clause is there. And I understand why it's important that if a country's facing a threat, they need to increase their defense spending. But what I don't understand, especially in light of everything that's gone on in the last week, is Europe is willing to put themselves into further debt and do whatever it takes to stand with Ukraine until the end of the war, which, remember, Zelensky initially said was going to be, quote, very, very far away until Trump paused aid. And then he, backtracked on that. And now suddenly he wants to stop the war, which that remains to be seen to me if that's legitimate or not. But my point is that the EU chose to go this route, right? Instead of putting their support behind Trump and working with the United States as our supposed allies to try and actually establish peace. And so kind of like what we saw with Congress in this speech, this is just like another sign of the global military industrial complex wanting to continue like endlessly funding this war.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And it makes us all look like we're not together as one. So what's the point of having allies when you're constantly, doing this? But this has been going viral on TikTok. I saw it all day yesterday where Starmer was saying, oh, we'll put boots on the ground and planes in the sky. And so there's all these young men in the UK that are like, what the fuck? We don't want that. We already have to deal with knife attacks out in the street from these people that you let in our country. We don't want to go fight and die for this, senseless war. So it's just crazy. And then on top of that, it was revealed that the EU gave more money to Russia last year than Ukraine. So the Morning Wire reported the EU spent $23 billion on oil and gas from Russia versus the $19 billion they gave Ukraine in military support. So once again, they're a bunch of hypocrites and in no place to negotiate anything whatsoever.
Yeah, this was something else Trump brought up during his speech when he was talking about Ukraine. And I came across this clip I want to play. It's from CNN. And the reason I want to play it is because Jake Tapper just seems to be so perplexed about how all this spending occurred.
Ironic, they're still reliant on Russian oil and gas, moving it throughout Europe or moving it to other places and bringing it back into Europe. So they're essentially putting as much money into supporting Russia and not putting as much money into actually defending Ukraine and then begging us to be the backstop for security. That comes to an end.
Yeah, I actually saw a study from a European group that showed that Europeans were actually buying more Russian oil and gas than they were helping Ukraine in terms of the aid. So in some ways, the Europeans are funding both sides in this war.
Really?
Like they don't get it. This is what happens when you don't allow digging, when you aren't energy independent, you dumbass. I mean, so crazy. And I was actually surprised because there was a CBS poll. So I'm like, okay, well, this always leans, to the left. But it actually said Trump has a +2 rating on Ukraine, where when Biden left in office, he was at -22. So the media, they can try to paint the picture that, Trump's doing a terrible job on Ukraine and the Democrats can all sit down and chant that they want the war to keep going. But their own polls tell a different story. People don't want this. And it's just making them look bad.
Yeah. And CNN, they actually talked about a poll as well. And they're trying to spin it negative and saying Trump's approval rating has dropped to 48%. Even if that was the case, that's still much higher than Biden's approval rating ever was.
If 48% of CNN viewers are supporting Trump, that's really astonishingly amazing because it used to be 100% of them hated Trump. So
yeah, and here's another idea too, because maybe Ukraine can start paying for their own war by selling t-shirts because reportedly the Ukrainian government just released a limited edition shirt and it says on the front of the shirt, "I'll wear the costume when this war is over," which again, this is what Zelensky told reporter Brian Glenn when we played that clip on Monday when he was asking why he didn't wear a suit to the Oval Office last Friday. So these t-shirts are apparently being given to anyone who donates $24 or more towards armored medical evacuation vehicles.
This guy, can you be any more disrespectful? Like, just shut your mouth. Just shut your mouth. You don't need to piss off Trump any more than you already have.
I do think it's pretty funny though, but
Yeah.
um all right, we got to switch gears to the whole tariff thing because that also happened yesterday. So, Trump's 25% tariff plan on imports from Mexico and Canada, as well as 10% on imports from China, went into effect yesterday. And Trump also apparently suggested that tariffs on goods from the European Union are coming very soon. He posted on True Social yesterday and said, to the great farmers of the United States, get ready to start making a lot of agricultural products to be sold inside of the United States. Have fun. And then he mentioned this in his speech, and he talked about how it's probably going to be an adjustment period at the beginning, but just bear with it and we'll, see the amazing results that benefit our country. So, of course, this started the whole retaliatory tariff game with Canada and Mexico yesterday. And Trudeau said that they're going to start their tariffs against the United States. So then Trump went back on Truth Social and said, please explain to Governor Trudeau of Canada that when he puts a retaliatory tariff on the United States, our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by a like amount. And I just want to mention Trudeau also commented that the only reason Trump is putting tariffs on Canada is because he wants to see the Canadian economy collapse so that it will be easier to annex Canada and make it part of the US. And who knows, maybe this is part of the plan since Trump does talk a lot about making Canada the 51st state. But anyhow, he brought up an interesting point where Trump said Canada doesn't allow American banks to do business in Canada, but their banks flood the American market. And he's like, seems fair, doesn't it? And then he also reiterated in another post, in one of those all caps posts, and he said, like, if companies just move their businesses to the United States, then there are no tariffs.
Yeah. I think it's ridiculous that all these countries and the news is trying to make these tariffs sound awful when they are literally they already have tariffs on us. They have forever. We're just simply returning the favor. Okay. But yeah, businesses are already coming to the United States, which honestly, I'm surprised. I thought it would take some time, like years before manufacturing would come back here. But you have Taiwan Semiconductor. They're investing a minimum of $100 billion in manufacturing their semiconductors in the United States inside of Arizona. And this is huge because I was thinking about it and I'm like, not only does this help the US take the lead with AI, but there's been this constant threat of China invading Taiwan. They say it's not if, but when. And the whole concern with, well, not the whole concern, but a big concern with that is that the Chinese would then get control of the semiconductor business there because that's where like the majority of it was. So by creating manufacturing here in the US, it kind of helps to eliminate that threat, but it's also creating jobs right here in America and helping our economy. So I don't know. I thought this was a huge win and we should all be cheering it on.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this is a great thing. I think this is exactly what we need is investments in America. And reportedly, there's a Wisconsin-based vehicle battery company called Clarios, and they announced on Monday that they're going to invest $6 billion to expand their manufacturing in the United States. Last week, Apple reaffirmed their commitment to invest $500 billion in the US over the next 5 years. And even the CEO of Pfizer announced that they're likely going to move some of their overseas manufacturing to US plants.
That's the one where I'm like, you can just stay over there. We don't want you here. Yeah, Honda, they are moving their factory from Mexico to the United States to avoid the tariffs. And then the other thing they were talking about, I don't know if he mentioned this in the speech, because like I said, I fell asleep, but all throughout the day, they were saying, border crossings, illegal border crossings are way down, but the fentanyl deaths are still super high. And so Trump doesn't feel like they're doing all that they can do to stop this. And so Mexico General Hector Jimenez Baez told the Daily Caller that for the first time in his 36-year career, they have checkpoints where they're searching vehicles and people before crossing the border. So they're taking action. But I mean, this is something so basic. This should have been done decades ago.
I was
You
going
know?
to say that is such a sad statement to
Yes.
say that you've been working there for 36 years and they haven't been enforcing any laws.
Right. I mean, I just couldn't believe like that's what he said. Like, oh, we're doing such a good job. Like, you mean you weren't doing that all along? Give me a break. But yeah, so like illegal crossings, I think you mentioned this before. They're the lowest they've been since 1968. But until people stop dying from fentanyl left and right, the tariffs are going to stay in place.
Yeah, then that's the main reason why he's going to stick with these tariffs for both Mexico and Canada because they're coming across both sides of the border. And
Yeah.
it's like we've talked about in the past, we can afford to play this game more than those two countries can. So bring it on, right?
That's right.
And I want to drop another like awesome Trump bombshell because I loved this. He announced yesterday that all federal funding will be stopped for any college, school, or university that allows illegal protests. So this was another Truth Social post, and he said, agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. And then in all caps, no masks. Thank you for your attention to this matter. But
Oh, I love that.
I mean, I know I love his little endings lately. Thank you. But personally, I think this is great because I firmly support the idea of legal, peaceful protests. I believe every American citizen has the right to peacefully protest.
Mhm.
I, however, don't believe that non-citizens should be able to protest. And I don't believe in the bullshit, quote unquote, peaceful protests that are actually just an excuse for violence, crime, and destruction of property, which is what a lot of these protests on campuses across the country have been for the last 4 years. And in fact, just last Wednesday, students at Columbia University stormed a campus building and ended up injuring a security guard and sending him to the hospital. And then the following day, an instructor at Columbia canceled classes so that his students could attend an anti-Israel demonstration, which was in violation of university policy. So I completely love that he wants to actually enforce that if you do this, you're either going to get expelled or possibly thrown in jail. And if you're doing this illegally, you're going back to your country.
Yeah, and I don't understand how this isn't like a hate crime or hate speech. I mean, they call Trump and JD Vance Nazis, but then they're still using this anti-Semitic rhetoric all over campuses and targeting Jewish students. And it's just the hypocrisy again just pisses me off, but I'm glad he's doing something about it.
Yeah, and I have some updates with DOGE as well. I don't think we had any on Monday because we were so obsessed with the whole what's going on with Ukraine. But the DoD announced on Monday that DOGE has identified about 80 million so far in defense spending, or more accurately, like DEI spending, including 2 million for a holistic DEI transformation and training in the Air Force. Holistic transformation. Okay. 6 million to the University of Montana to strengthen American democracy by bridging divides, and 1.6 million to the University of Florida to study social and institutional determinants of vulnerability and resilience to climate hazards in the Sahel region of Africa.
Okay, I am really glad you brought that up because I did not know that the University of Florida was woke. So, not sending my kid there.
And the media is like totally up in arms because DOGE announced that the employee count at an agency called the Inter-American Foundation is going to be basically decimated. They have 48 employees and they're reducing it to just one. And Elon posted about this on the DOGE website. But what does this foundation do, right? They issue foreign grants. And you really don't need a whole staff to do that. Because let's talk about what some of the recent grants have been, okay? 903,000 for alpaca farming in Peru, $364,000 to reduce social discrimination of recyclers in Bolivia.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. I don't know. Over 813,000 for vegetable gardens in El Salvador. Almost 323,000 to promote cultural understanding of Venezuelan migrants in Brazil. 731,000 to improve marketability of mushrooms and peas in Guatemala. 677,000 to expand fruit and jam sales in Honduras. 483,000 to improve artisanal salt production in Ecuador, and almost 40,000 for beekeeping in Brazil.
You know how many people that are at these farmer markets would love to have even $1,000 grant to help their, farming and grow gardens and everything else? Like, it's ridiculous. But speaking of Doge, I want to play a clip. I had trouble because I wanted to play like a million clips of this interview on Joe Rogan of Elon Musk. And this one that I'm going to play explains how this whole scam works with these NGOs.
Like one of the biggest, maybe the biggest scam ever.
And how many NGOs?
I think there's a total number of NGOs, probably millions, but in terms of large NGOs, tens of thousands. I mean, it's actually kind of a hack to the system where someone can get an NGO stood up for a fairly small amount of money. Like George Soros was really good at this. Like George Soros is like a system hacker. Like he figured out how to hack the system. He's a genius at arbitrage. I mean, these days he's pretty old, but a genius at arbitrage. So he figured out that you could leverage a small amount of money to create a nonprofit, then lobby the politicians to send a ton of money to that nonprofit. So you can take what might be, a $10 million donation to a nonprofit to create a nonprofit and leverage that into $1 billion NGO. And a nonprofit is a weird word. It's just a non-governmental organization. And then the government continues to fund that every year. And it'll have a nice sounding name, like the Institute for Peace or something like that. But really, it's a graft machine.
And what are the requirements with that money? What do they have to do?
Just really no requirements at all.
So they just get grants and the government just assumes that they're doing good work.
I think a lot of people in the government know that they're not doing good work. It's a gigantic scam. Like one of the biggest, maybe.
Okay, so this is important because I for the longest time, I thought when you hear nonprofit, oh, like they are doing good work, right? But no, like it's a front basically for all of this corruption. And go ahead, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to bring this up later, but it's perfect to bring it up right now because I just read an article this morning about one of these grants. And it was, the Biden EPA, they have their, climate justice community change program. And this was when Biden was it was back in December when he was throwing money at basically anything that moved so that, Trump would be fucked financially. And so they gave this social justice advocacy group called Democracy Green, gave them $20 million in taxpayer funds so that they could remove lead pipes in hundreds of homes and communities and invest in nature-based solutions to restore the wetlands and support biodiversity. But check this out, because this company or this NGO, whatever it is, Democracy Green, has never done any of these things before. They have never done lead pipe removals. They have never done wetlands restoration. The only remotely environmental thing that this corporation or organization did was to provide less than 200 families in central North Carolina with home water quality test kits and water filtration pitchers. Clearly this is fraudulent. There's a very big difference between water test kits and a lead pipe replacement project.
Yeah. And I think this is where the corruption comes in, because I'm sure that there's a politician tied to that company that's like, hey, I know they're never going to check and you don't really have to do anything and you can get all this money. And Elon Musk went on to say too that he explained it in terms of, okay, let's say there is an NGO that's getting $20 billion a year, okay? Or they get $20 billion one time. Well, then the manager that approves this dies, retires, transfers departments. They just keep getting that $20 billion every year. Like there was nothing in place to stop it, to check it. I mean, it's just absurd. It's absolutely absurd. But I want to play this other clip too, because then they started talking about all the politicians that became millionaires over the past 4 years.
Yes.
Listen to what he says.
They're going to get me assassinated. It's more than just insider trading. Like the insider trading stuff, like the stock portfolio stuff is quite trackable, but it's a lot more than insider trading.
The way they're acquiring wealth.
Correct.
And what other methods?
I mean, this is really going to get me assassinated. It's like I'm not lengthening my lifespan by explaining this stuff, to say the least. I mean, I was supposed to go back to DC. How am I going to survive? This fucker's going to kill me for sure. In fact, I do think like it's like I actually have to be careful that I don't push too hard on the corruption stuff because it's going to get me killed. Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to play that clip because just think about this. The richest man in the world that can afford the best security in the world, he genuinely sounds afraid. So afraid that he never did say exactly what he found because he thinks for sure he will die. That says a lot right there. And so, of course, I go to the comments. And in the comments, people are assuming like maybe he's found the human trafficking link that they're all profiting from. And that's why he won't bring it up. But the fact that he is so afraid to, talk about what's happening, everyone should be concerned about that, So it's just crazy. And not...
No, I was going to say, I think people are probably correct because if you look at everything that's being exposed under, the DEI guys, I guarantee you, like, some of that has to be related, or maybe most of it has to be related to human trafficking. Go back to these, hundreds of thousands of migrant children that disappeared, and we still don't know where any of them are. I mean, they found a handful of them, right? But we still don't know what happened to these kids. And I get what he's saying because you can expose the DEI spending and you can expose, some of the fraud that's taking place. But the major shit is with these, the Clinton kill list people.
Yes.
And so I don't blame him for being afraid.
And didn't they just enter the Pentagon not that long ago? So it's like you're getting into the military industrial complex as well. And I'm sure like they realize just how big this is. I mean, how there's a whole other, shadow government that I think, they're probably seeing. And I would be afraid too if I were him, because I don't trust any of these people. And not to go completely off topic, but I have to bring this up because remember when we found out not that long ago that the astronauts were still stuck in space and we were like, what the heck happened? Elon Musk, we thought he rescued them. Well, Joe Rogan asked him about this and he said he was supposed to go get them, but the Biden administration stopped it because of politics, because Elon was supporting Trump. And he said, so they, rescheduled it till after the election. And he said, so I still have to go and get them. And Joe Rogan's like, so you're going to get them. And he said, I'm the only one that can, the only one that has the ship to go and actually rescue them. So, I mean, they left those people in space over politics.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is crazy because they are still there, right? Yeah. And they were supposed to be there for 8 days and it has now been 9 months. And like he said, they're actually supposed to be coming home later this month, like somewhere around March 17th, 18th. And their replacements to the International Space Station are going to be coming next week. But I read this morning, okay? These two astronauts, like this is totally unrelated, but you kind of maybe want to go down this rabbit hole. They're going to have to go through a shit ton of medical treatment when they get back because they won't be able to walk on their own because they've been living in low gravity for so long. And they're saying it could take 6 weeks or more of rehabilitation to regain their strength and flexibility. And they've been exposed to extreme levels of space radiation, which increases their risk of developing cancer, central nervous system damage, bone loss, cardiovascular disease. And the article I was reading talked about how, according to NASA, astronauts can lose up to 20% of their muscle mass after just 5 days in low gravity. And weight-bearing bone loss occurs between like 1 to 1.5% of their density every month during what are usually 4 to 6 month missions. And research has shown that a 30 to 50-year-old astronaut who spends 6 months in space will lose about half of their strength. And these guys have been up there for 9 months. And remember, they were only prepared to be there for a week. So I think they're going to have a very long recovery road ahead.
It's just absolutely terrible and astonishing. And the fact that, like, I feel like they led us to believe that they were rescued. Like, the media did their thing, making it sound like they were rescued. And then after the election, we find out, nope, they weren't.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy. But while, all of this media attention has been on the shit show with Trump and Zelensky and, Trump's speech, um, I didn't realize this, but Linda McMahon was confirmed as the education secretary on Monday. And she sent out an email to the DOE staff and outlined her plans. And she wants to have parents be the primary decision makers in their children's education, which they absolutely should be. She wants education to go back to focusing on math, reading, science, and history. And she said that post-secondary education should result in well-paying careers aligned with workforce needs. So even though I don't have kids, I'm very interested to see what she's going to do with the DOE. And she did say that, you can't get rid of it because that would require an act of Congress, which we've talked about before. But I think she is going to institute some really good changes, hopefully.
I hope so. We need some massive, massive changes. And I mean, she's the type that would be able to get it done. So that's really good news. Okay, I'm going to end with something that it sounds like it's a pattern at this point. Okay, so the Carolinas are dealing with wildfires. What area is hit the worst? Myrtle Beach. Guess what's slated to become the next smart city? Myrtle fucking Beach. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. And like, as of yesterday, they said 2,000 acres were on fire with 0% of it contained. So, I mean, how many more cities does this have to happen to before people are like, yeah, this is not a coincidence?
I have to ask you a question. Is Myrtle Beach like actually a beach? Like, is it on the beach?
Yeah.
So you have like Palisades is a beach community. Maui was a beach community. And now this is a beach community.
And they all have had plans in place for a smart city. The only thing getting in the way is all the old infrastructure. I mean, I watched so many local news clips that were created, over the past year or two where they're talking about how, the infrastructure, nothing's been updated in decades. And it's just going to be this new, like, amazing place because it's like a tourist capital of our country. And yeah, of course, right on the water is a wildfire, because that's just normal. I mean, it's just wild. I think if you live in a city that's slated to become a smart city, I highly suggest you do two things. Number one, check your insurance policy for natural disasters. Number two, paint your roof blue. That's
and your car.
And your car.
Yeah.
Just wear something blue. Just put like a blue. I mean, oh my gosh. So we'll be tracking that because these wildfires, I mean.
I was going to say, it sounds like we might have another conspiracy episode on this coming up.
Yep. We'll be watching it closely and keep everyone posted. So yeah, another day of just a shit ton of things going on, but at least it's mostly good now. We're moving in such a positive direction as a country. So we'll keep track of all this and see you back here on Friday. Thanks for tuning in.